Lisa and the Mystery of the Forgotten Garden. Why her journey leads to an ancient castle. Lisa stood by the window of the train, watching as the last traces of the urban landscape vanished beyond the horizon. For years, her life had been a constant whirl of chaos and stress. Work calls, endless meetings, and career anxieties consumed her attention. Yet amidst this relentless race, she felt her inner strength fading. The need for change became irresistible, and finally, she made her decision. The train carried her to a quiet valley, to an ancient castle hidden among green hills. Lisa couldn't quite explain why she had chosen this place. There were no flashy ads, enticing tours, or famous attractions. But one thing had drawn her: a forgotten garden, concealed behind large iron gates, about which she'd heard stories at the hotel. Once, the garden was the pride of the estate, but it had long been neglected. When the train finally stopped at the small station, Lisa rose with a light heart and a faint sense of anticipation. She felt as though she had stepped into a timeless world, one where she could finally lay down her burdens. The castle and its garden were only a few kilometers from the station, and Lisa decided to walk, eager to immerse herself fully in the new environment. Her steps were unhurried, as if nature itself invited her to slow down and focus. As she strolled through the village, her attention was drawn to old stone houses with green rooftops covered in vines. At last, she stood before the tall fence surrounding the castle. A sign on the gate read, "The Secret Garden." The name sounded like a promise of an unseen world, waiting to reveal itself if she dared to enter. Crossing the gates, Lisa felt the air change instantly. It grew fresh and soothing, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and damp earth. The garden was, as she expected, old and slightly overgrown. Paths were mossy, and trees cast strange, intricate shadows. Yet the garden radiated an intense, enigmatic energy, as though it harbored ancient secrets waiting to be uncovered. Lisa wandered along the paths, unhurriedly. She allowed herself simply to exist in the space. Strange sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the gentle sighs of the wind through the branches, evoked a sense of peace mixed with something magical. She noticed her breathing slowing, and her once incessant thoughts began to quiet. After a while, Lisa came across a small stone bench by an old pond, its still waters reflecting the sky and nearby trees. The bench looked ancient, but sturdy enough. Lisa sat and leaned back against the cool stone, feeling her body relax. For the first time in a long while, she felt weightless, as though all her worries had become insignificant. Nearby, a peculiar plant with large green leaves and vibrant flowers caught her eye. It looked almost otherworldly, as if crafted for this very garden. Lisa reached out to touch one of its leaves, and as she did, she felt a gentle wave of warmth and an unexpected clarity of mind. It was the first sign that the garden might offer her a path to self-discovery. She remained on the bench, gazing at the pond's surface, which mirrored the trees and sky above. The water was so calm it seemed like a glass window to another world. Lisa felt the years of accumulated tension slowly dissolve, like ripples disappearing into stillness. Stretching her shoulders, she noticed her breath becoming deeper and more even. The silence around her wasn't empty but alive, as though nature was speaking to her in a forgotten language. For a moment, Lisa closed her eyes and allowed herself to truly be. Her serene moment was interrupted by the faint rustle of movement. Lisa opened her eyes and glanced around. Beneath a bush by the pond, she noticed a small creature. It was a rabbit with silvery fur, cautiously approaching the water to drink. Its delicate appearance stirred something within her, a mix of tenderness and wonder. The rabbit's large, curious eyes met hers, seeming to wait for her reaction. Lisa smiled gently and leaned forward, careful not to disturb it. The rabbit drank quietly and then disappeared into the underbrush. The encounter left Lisa with a sense of harmony and connection. Time in the garden felt different, slow and unhurried. Here, the past and future didn't matter, only the present moment. And in this moment, she felt part of something greater. After lingering by the pond a little longer, Lisa decided to continue exploring. She rose from the bench and followed the winding stone path, which seemed to lead deeper into the garden. Strangely, the garden felt endless, even though she knew its borders were enclosed by the fence. Every turn and every step revealed new sights hidden behind the foliage. With each step, Lisa felt herself becoming more centered and present. She no longer thought about work, planned, or worried. She simply walked, and it was liberating. As her body relaxed and her thoughts quieted, she realized how rare such peace had been in her life. Always busy, always striving, that had been her way. What happened to the moments when I simply was? She wondered. Her inner voice answered, "You didn't allow yourself those moments. You were always rushing somewhere. But now you're here, and this is all that matters." As these thoughts filled her mind, Lisa noticed the garden changing. The trees grew denser, and the air became richer. Each plant seemed both familiar and new. She suddenly spotted a unique flower, pale violet with silvery petals and a scent as sweet as incense. Lisa stepped closer and touched it gently. In that moment, she felt warmth envelop her hands. The flower was extraordinarily soft, and its touch was calming, as though she had connected with the very heart of the garden. Closing her eyes, Lisa allowed herself to sink into this feeling, fully present in the moment. The garden seemed to guide her as she continued exploring its depths. Eventually, she came upon an elderly man sitting on a low stone border at the garden's edge. His simple yet elegant coat made him look perfectly at home in the surroundings. His face was lined with age, but his expression was kind and serene. He didn't notice Lisa at first, lost in his own thoughts. As Lisa approached, he looked up and smiled. "You've come to our garden, young lady?" he asked in a soft voice. Lisa nodded, her heart quickening slightly at the unexpected encounter. "Yes, I'm just wandering. This place is incredible. This place," he said with a gentle smile, "can give you what you're looking for, but it's not always easy to know what that is." Lisa pondered his words, sitting beside him. They resonated deeply, even though she wasn't entirely sure why. That evening, the old man appeared in the garden again. He approached Lisa, who was sitting on a bench, and sat down beside her. She noticed that his face looked as serene as her own. "You understand now," he said, looking at her warmly. Lisa nodded. She felt that the garden, with its silence and beauty, had begun to change her perception of everything around her. Each day, she grew more certain that she had found something important in this place. I realized that my life has always been filled with noise. I always chased big goals and success. But here, I understand that not everything depends on what I achieve. Inner peace isn't something external life grants us. It's something that comes when you find your place in the world, Lisa said, surprised at how easily she could articulate her thoughts. The old man smiled, his face full of approval. You've grasped it correctly, and now you're ready to discover even more. The garden awaits you. Your journey has only just begun. Day by day, Lisa felt the garden becoming her home. Her days were filled with silence, and her heart with peace. The garden revealed a new perception of life to her. The chaos of daily worries and anxiety about the future disappeared. All Lisa felt was a unity with nature and her own inner world. The garden taught her how crucial it is to be present, alive, and real, without needing to seek anything external. One day, as she walked along the stone paths, Lisa noticed some unusual stones laid out in a circle at the base of an old oak tree. They were moss-covered yet didn't seem neglected. On the contrary, they appeared to be part of an ancient design she couldn't fully understand. She stopped and examined the circle. The stones seemed to form a symbol, more profound than mere geometry. Stepping closer, Lisa placed her hand on one of the stones. As her fingers touched the cold surface, she felt a slight tingling in her palm, as if the stone came to life. As if in response to her touch, the air around her grew lighter, and space seemed to expand. Images, spacious and silent, appeared in her mind. She felt herself becoming one with the universe, one with everything around her. Her eyes closed, and she sank into the silence. "What is this?" Lisa whispered, though no sound came. Instead, she felt her soul filling with tranquility, as though all questions vanished, leaving only pure existence. She opened her eyes and looked at the circle of stones again. Now, everything was clear. This was a path that had brought her here, a path that led inward. That evening, as Lisa returned to the old oak to reflect on what she had experienced, her attention was drawn to a small clearing surrounded by low bushes. In the clearing grew rare flowers, and among them stood an old but strikingly beautiful reflective screen, like a natural mirror supported by delicate branches. Lisa stepped closer, treading carefully over the grass. She felt her heart beat faster. This screen was so unusual. It wasn't just a mirror, but a mystical object emitting a soft glow. She bent down to look into it. In the reflection, she saw her face, but it was different. Lisa noticed her expression had become more serene, her eyes clearer, as though she was seeing herself without bias. Suddenly, the mirror revealed another scene. Behind her, the space began to disappear, replaced by images from her life. A moment from her childhood when she ran through fields, a vision of her mother, now a memory, and herself, grown, yet still unaware of who she truly was. Her gaze fixed on the image as her face slowly changed. Each new reflection revealed more of her true self. Lisa saw not just her appearance, but also her inner transformation. This was a reflection of the journey she had taken. "Do you see?" You are becoming who you have always been. You just needed to let go of everything extra to see yourself," came the voice of the old man, who had appeared behind her. Lisa turned, and his wise eyes met hers. The garden shows us that everything we are is already within us. We just forget how to see ourselves. Lisa watched as the old man slowly approached the mirror and, without hesitation, looked into its surface. He remained silent, as if absorbing all the reflections. Lisa couldn't understand what he was seeking in the mirror, but she sensed it was something significant. The old man turned to her and said, "Mirrors, like the garden, help us understand what we are looking for in life. But the answers aren't always obvious. Sometimes, we come here to see ourselves as we truly are." Lisa listened, realizing that her understanding of reality was already changing. What once seemed ordinary now felt extraordinary, and her perspective on the world was becoming clearer. You're not learning to be someone, you're learning to be yourself. And that is the greatest freedom, the old man continued. Lisa pondered these words. Her life had always been about striving for achievements, external goals. But now, in this garden, she understood that life's meaning might not lie in what we achieve, but in what we discover within ourselves and how we perceive the world. The following morning, after a long night of reflection, Lisa found herself back in the garden. The sun had just begun to rise, and its rays filtered through the leaves, casting a soft light. Lisa felt she was part of this light, part of the garden. Each step, each glance at the flowers, trees, and the pond filled her with inner peace. She realized her life had changed, but the changes weren't external. They were internal. Perhaps the garden was the place that had helped her find this peace and inner harmony. Returning to the circle of stones, she stood at its center and closed her eyes. She felt her heart beating in unison with the rhythm of the garden. She no longer sought answers. She simply existed. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. Everything she had experienced in recent days kept swirling in her mind. Images, symbols, reflections. She tried to piece them together, but still felt something important was missing. The garden had become her second home, and she began to sense that every part of it spoke to her, that each branch and plant was like a part of her own soul. She stood by the window of her small garden house, listening to the night's silence. Only the rustle of leaves and distant sounds of nocturnal creatures could be heard. The garden, as always, was filled with peace, but now it seemed even more magical, hidden, like a mystery she needed to uncover. Lisa knew there was more to understand, that her journey wasn't over despite these profound experiences. Something within her was still unsettled, and she felt the garden held the key to finding the answer. The next morning, Lisa decided to go deeper, further exploring the garden. Returning to the stone circle, she felt the same magic as before. Standing at its center, she felt a slight tingling in her feet and heart. It seemed the circle was a place of power, exposing her innermost feelings. When she turned to leave, she noticed an old man sitting on a stone, watching her. It wasn't the elderly man she had spoken to before, but another, with a more stern expression. He was dressed simply but neatly, and his eyes were clear and attentive. "Have you been here long?" Lisa asked, slightly embarrassed that she hadn't noticed him earlier. The man nodded and replied, "This garden has long been part of my path. But you didn't come here by accident. You're seeking answers, even though you don't yet know what they mean to you." Lisa felt his words carried deep meaning, but she didn't know how to interpret them. Deciding not to rush with questions, she simply sat beside him, immersed in silence. After a while, the man spoke again. "You see this garden, Lisa, as a reflection of your inner world. But there's one important thing you don't yet understand. To truly learn to listen to it, you must learn to listen to yourself." Lisa pondered this. Her mind was full of thoughts and feelings, but how did they relate to her inner world? How could she learn to listen to herself? In the following days, Lisa dedicated herself to understanding what it meant to listen to herself. Every time she was in the garden, she tried to quiet down and hear her inner voice. She sat under the trees, watching the birds, or walked along the ponds, trying to sense her thoughts and feelings. At one point, when Lisa found herself by the pond again, she noticed her gaze increasingly focused on the water. And in that moment, as she looked at its surface, she realized that the water reflected not only her outward appearance, but also her soul. Each time she looked into the pond, her inner feelings became clearer. Her thoughts seemed to flow into the water, leaving behind only a simple but clear harmony. Lisa began to feel that her inner world was no longer filled with questions and uncertainty. The water in the pond symbolized her soul, calm and deep, ready for self-reflection and self-acceptance. One day, when Lisa met the man again near the stone circle, he asked her, "Are you ready to let go of everything that holds you back from peace?" Lisa didn't answer immediately. These words seemed to hold the key to her understanding. She realized that all her life, she had been searching for something external to make her happy, to fill the emptiness within her. But now, in this garden, she understood that her happiness wasn't in external success or recognition. It was within her, and to find it, she needed to learn to let go of all fears and doubts. "Yes," she replied, with difficulty but with determination in her voice. The man nodded, as if he already knew her answer. Acceptance is not the end of the path. It is the beginning. And only when you accept yourself as you are will you be able to move forward without losing yourself. Lisa felt her heart fill with light. She realized that all she needed to do was let go, to stop fighting with herself and the world. The path to inner peace wasn't about achieving something, but about being open and receptive. That day, as Lisa sat by the pond and thought about everything that had happened to her, the old man appeared again. He approached her and, without saying a word, sat down nearby. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, and Lisa felt herself completely dissolve in the moment. "You've already understood so much," said the old man, his words sounding like a blessing. "Yes," Lisa replied, smiling. She felt her soul had become light, free. "But remember," the old man continued, "the journey continues. This garden, like life, is endless. You will find much in it, but the most important thing you will find is yourself. And when you find yourself, you will be ready to open up to everything around you." Lisa looked at the old man with gratitude in her eyes. She understood that this wasn't just a lesson. It was a true revelation. She was ready to move forward, confident in herself and her ability to be authentic. When Lisa woke up again at dawn, her heart was filled with an unusual calm. She lay for a long time, watching the first rays of sunlight stream through the window and touch her face. This light was soft, warm, and unhurried. It wasn't like the light of ordinary days. It was full of anticipation, as if the world itself was preparing to reveal something important to her. She rose from her bed and slowly walked through the house, stepping out into the garden. Everything was as it always was. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of flowers and greenery, and the sounds of nature gently enveloped her. But today, there was something special. The garden seemed ready to open new horizons, new mysteries. Lisa felt that behind this calm lay something deeper, something significant. Immersed in thought, she approached the edge of the pond, where her gaze was immediately drawn to the surface of the water. She increasingly felt that the pond wasn't just a part of the garden. It was a place where she could meet herself, look into her soul. Reflections in the water had always been more than just a mirror for her. They became maps, showing not only outer forms, but also the inner world. This time, the reflection in the water seemed especially alive. Lisa saw her face on the surface of the pond gradually disappear, then reappear, clearer, brighter, as if she had become more herself. The reflection was calm, silent, and clear. She didn't hurry, didn't rush. Time didn't matter here. There was no need to strive for anything. Everything flowed naturally. Several hours passed, and Lisa decided she needed a little rest. The garden remained just as quiet, and she headed to her favorite spot, under the old oak tree. Its branches seemed to protect this corner of the garden, creating shade where it was especially pleasant to spend time. Lisa sat on the soft grass, leaning against the tree trunk. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to fully immerse in the moment. The wind softly rustled the leaves, and distant birds sang their unnoticed song. She felt her thoughts begin to dissolve into this serenity. This moment was hers, only hers. "Everything around you is a part of you," a voice suddenly said, and Lisa was not surprised to hear the elder's words again. He seemed to appear at just the right moment to support her. This time, he sat beside her, respecting her silence. "You are learning to let go," he continued. "Perhaps you've noticed that the garden is gradually changing. It reveals its secrets to you, but only when you're ready to hear and understand them." Lisa silently nodded, feeling his words seep into her consciousness like water into the pond. Many seek answers outside of themselves. They believe external events and people can provide what they lack. But the truth has always been within you. All you need is to learn to listen to yourself. Lisa felt her soul resonate with these words. Day by day, her understanding deepened. She no longer sought any big solutions or revelations. She understood that the path of self-discovery was not about striving for something extraordinary. It was simply being in the moment, accepting what is, pure existence, calmness. That evening, as the garden was once again enveloped in a light evening coolness, Lisa decided to visit another special place, the valley where old junipers grew. These trees were particularly unusual to her. Lisa felt there was something unique hidden within their curves and ancient branches. Their scent was deep and rich, as though they carried all the wisdom of the past. Lisa stepped onto the narrow path leading into the valley. Her steps were light, and her thoughts were clear. She walked slowly, letting her eyes and body absorb every detail, every sound. Soon she reached the middle of the valley and stopped, feeling her soul fill with harmony. This was a place for silence, a place where she could simply be, without the need for searching or answers. Here, among these mighty trees, she felt her own energy intertwine with the energy of all living things. Lisa sat at the base of one of the majestic junipers, closed her eyes, and allowed herself to relax. Silence enveloped her, and she felt her breathing become steady and deep. This moment became another step on her journey toward inner peace. She no longer sought solutions, nor did she search for meaning. She was simply there, in that moment, and it was enough. When Lisa woke, she discovered that night had fallen. Time in this garden seemed to lose all significance. It felt as though only a moment had passed, although several hours had gone by. Everything around her was as misty and gentle as her dream. The stars in the sky were especially bright and close, as if the universe itself was watching over her. Lisa felt her soul dissolve into this infinite space, her body becoming part of the endless night. In that moment, she needed nothing. No answers, no decisions. Lisa was in a state where everything unfolded on its own. The space, the stars, the air, all were in unity, and she was part of that unity. Time passed, but for Lisa, it was irrelevant. This moment was eternal. She sat in the garden, surrounded by the night's silence, and felt her soul fill with light. The next morning, Lisa woke with a sense that the world around her had become even brighter, as if she was beginning to perceive everything in a new way. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, its warm light bathing the garden, casting soft golden shadows. Lisa felt her soul fill with lightness. Her breathing was deeper and calmer, and her thoughts were clearer. Everything seemed so simple and natural. She decided to visit the old oak again, under which she often sought shade and solitude. Today, she felt something new awaited her there. With each step she took through the morning garden, Lisa felt her inner energy grow stronger. It was one of those rare moments when every movement was deliberate and every sensation complete. When she reached the tree, she noticed that its shade now held not only light but something else, an impression that the very earth whispered something important to her. Lisa slowly sat on the grass and closed her eyes, sinking into the moment. The silence that surrounded her was not just the absence of sound. It was a silence filled with expectation, as if nature itself was ready to reveal something new to her. Lisa felt her body relax and her mind quiet. She wasn't trying to understand what was happening. She simply existed, and that was enough. That day, Lisa decided to take the path leading to the hill where an old mill stood. The mill had long been unused, but for Lisa, this place had become a symbol of transformation. Her eyes no longer saw it as abandoned, but as a living testament to time and wisdom. The old wooden wheels of the mill, once turning, now stood still, but Lisa felt they could come alive again if she understood something essential about herself. When she climbed the hill where the mill stood, she stopped to take in her surroundings. The entire garden, the valley, the pond, and everything around her seemed to come together in a single picture. She felt her inner tension fade away, replaced by a deep sense of connection with the world. The world was vast, yet Lisa no longer felt separate from it. She was in harmony with it. Only those who can listen to the silence can understand its message, the elder suddenly said, appearing beside her as though he had never left. He stood silently for a few minutes, and Lisa felt his presence calm her. "You are learning to be part of this world," he said, his voice soft and penetrating. "You don't need to seek answers. You need to feel them." Lisa looked at him and replied with a smile, "But how can I know if what I feel is real? How can I be sure it's the truth?" The elder nodded, as if he knew this question was inevitable. True answers cannot be found in the mind. They come through feelings, through what we experience in our body, our emotions, and how we perceive the world. When you let go of all your doubts and fears, you will know. Because it will not just be knowledge, it will be a feeling. Lisa reflected on his words. She understood he was speaking about something profound, but it wasn't just intellectual understanding. It was something that required more than her mind. It was a feeling that needed to be freed and allowed to exist. When Lisa returned to the mill, evening was already approaching. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with soft pink and orange hues. She sat down next to the stones that surrounded the old mill and closed her eyes again. She listened as the evening silence gradually filled with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. That moment, when the sun disappeared below the horizon, became a symbol for her of how light and shadow can be inseparably connected. Light is not only brightness and life, but also the opportunity to see the shadow, to understand it. And the shadow is not the absence of light, but a part of it. Lisa felt how her own perception of light and shadow was changing. The mill, standing in the evening light, seemed magical. Lisa could have stayed there for hours, but something in her inner sense told her that her journey would continue. She understood that the garden was not the final destination. It was an important stage, but just a part of a larger path she had yet to travel. In the evening, sitting under a tree, Lisa suddenly remembered her past. How she often felt the weight of unresolved problems and grievances. She remembered the people who had once hurt her, and the moments when she couldn't forgive herself for her mistakes. Lisa realized that many of her doubts and fears were caused by these unfinished emotional chains. She felt how important it was to forgive, both herself and others. She took a deep breath and felt how each breath brought liberation. Forgiveness is not for forgetting. It is for releasing, she recalled the old man's words. And she decided to forgive. To forgive for everything. To forgive herself for not always being perfect, and to forgive others for their mistakes, because she understood that forgiveness was not weakness, but strength. It was her freedom. The sunset was beautiful and full of magic. Lisa sat in that peaceful corner of the garden, realizing that the path to self-knowledge is not a straight one. It is a path through light and shadow, through inner experiences and encounters with those who help us see ourselves in a new light. With each day, Lisa felt herself opening up more to the world. She was no longer seeking perfection, but harmony. Harmony with herself, with the world around her, and with those who were near. She no longer felt lost or confused. All she needed was to be. to be in the moment, to be in the present. And in this was everything she needed for happiness. The next morning, Lisa woke up feeling an extraordinary lightness. The house was quiet, and when she opened the window, the fresh morning air filled her chest like a light but rich aroma after rain. In that moment, Lisa felt how nature was not just around her. It was a part of her. The air, the sun, the earth. All of it became an inseparable part of her essence. She wasn't in a hurry. There was no need to rush in her life. Time had become something pliable and soft, like a liquid that seemed no longer confined by rigid boundaries. She felt how her breath synchronized with the movement of the wind. Each step she took was conscious and calm. Lisa rose and walked to the garden, where the morning sun touched the leaves of the trees with soft golden light. She approached her favorite pond and looked into its reflective surface once again. The water, as always, seemed like a living being, ready to reveal its secrets. But today, Lisa did not expect anything from the water. She simply watched, feeling its calmness and silence. The water demanded no answers, offered no solutions. It was simply what it was, calm and eternal. She slowed her pace to fully immerse herself in this moment, allowing herself to dissolve even more into this feeling. She no longer searched in the mirror of the water to find herself. She was where she was, and that was enough. After breakfast, Lisa decided to go to the forest again. This place always gave her a sense of solitude and peace, where her thoughts could scatter and her soul could rest. The forest was calm, filled with the whisper of the wind and the scent of pine. Each step on the soft forest floor filled her with the sensation that she was not just walking. She was merging with this world, becoming a part of it. Lisa reached a small clearing where several large trees stood, and she chose one of them. Approaching its trunk, she slowly sat down on the ground, feeling her body relax, and her thoughts gradually disappeared, dissolving into the silence. Here, in this place, Lisa realized that her presence was a part of the whole, like a drop in the ocean. And in that drop, there was everything. At one point, Lisa felt her heart beat in time with the rhythm of nature. Each heartbeat was like an elusive sound of the wind, a vibration that connected her with the surrounding world. She didn't try to understand how it worked. She simply accepted it, and it was incredibly calming. The silence of the forest became a language for her that required no words. In this world, there was no pressure, no need to be someone else. Lisa was exactly who she was, and that was enough. As she immersed herself in this deep silence, Lisa unexpectedly heard a light rustling in the leaves. She looked up and saw a large bird sitting on a branch of a tree. It was extraordinarily beautiful. Its feathers shimmered in all shades of green and gold, as if nature itself had created it to be a part of the forest. The bird looked at Lisa with its clear eyes, and in its gaze, there was something deep that made Lisa feel she was standing before a symbol. The bird did not say a word, but its presence was full of meaning. Lisa quietly smiled, realizing that even without words, this moment was full of answers. The bird froze, motionless, and Lisa felt her soul filling with a silence that could speak without words. In that silence, there was everything she had been seeking: simplicity, light, peace. After a while, The bird spread its wings and, without rushing, flew away, disappearing into the greenery of the forest. Lisa remained in the clearing, her heart full of gratitude for this brief but profound moment. When Lisa returned to the house, the sun was already nearing the horizon. A light autumn chill filled the air, and she felt how the day smoothly transitioned into night, and the night, in turn, was ready to share its silent wisdom with her. She stood at the threshold, watching the horizon where the last ray of light was gradually disappearing, and the sky was growing darker. The evening became her time for reflection. Here, in this house, Lisa felt that a new stage in her life had begun. She was no longer seeking answers. She already knew that everything she needed was inside her. She realized that this path of self-knowledge had no final destination because the process itself was whole and complete. Every moment was important in itself, and in it, there was everything she needed. She lit candles in the house, and the warm light of their flames filled the space with comfort and peace. The evening was her time to connect with herself, to reassess the day that had passed, and understand that everything that had happened was part of her path. She wasn't in a hurry to go to bed. A few more hours passed in silence as she sat by the window, simply watching the changes in the world. Lisa approached the bed, but before lying down, she sat again by the window, gazing at the star-filled night sky. It was a tranquility in which she could dissolve. She realized that each night was an opportunity for renewal, both for nature and her soul. At that moment, Lisa felt how, with each breath, her body relaxed even more, and her thoughts quieted. She turned back to the window, inhaling the fresh night air, and with each exhale, she felt how the world around her became soft and light. Everything was as it should be. As she drifted to sleep, she felt a peace in her heart. And in this peace, there was room for everything. For silence, for pain, for happiness, and for all the moments that had brought her here. She was no longer searching for anything more. She was already a whole world, and the world was a part of her. Several days passed, filled with lightness and silence. Lisa woke up more and more often with a sense of gratitude, as if life itself had come to her with a simple gift, silence. She began to notice that each day became clearer and more conscious, and her body more sensitive to every moment. Each morning, she spent time in the shade of the trees, listening to the gentle breezes running through the branches. She felt every note in the air, every movement. Today, Lisa decided to start her day with meditation. She prepared her place. A soft mat by the window, which looked out onto a wide hill, with a cup of herbal tea beside it. She sat cross-legged and closed her eyes. Inhale, exhale. Each breath filled her mind with greater clarity, and as in the past days, she didn't rush. There were no worries in her mind. Everything unfolded at its own pace. For the first few minutes, Lisa let her attention wander freely, without holding on to it. Thoughts came and went like clouds, leaving no trace. But then, at some point, she felt her consciousness begin to deepen. All external sounds began to fade, and within her, a quiet voice echoed. It wasn't a voice, but more like a sensation, her inner self telling her, "You are fine. You are already here." Lisa didn't try to analyze this message. She simply accepted it, feeling a deep peace fill her. She sat in that state for a long time, sensing how each breath dissolved into this absolute calm. That day, Lisa decided to take a walk through the forest, but this time her path was a little different. She walked without a goal, just following her feelings. She wasn't trying to find anything or achieve something. There was lightness in her steps, as if she were simply following her own thoughts. After some time, Lisa discovered an old abandoned spot in the forest. It was a small clearing, surrounded by tall trees, and in the center stood an old wooden mirror, covered in moss and vines. The mirror, seemingly forgotten in this place, looked mysterious, even somewhat mystical. Lisa didn't approach immediately, but froze, sensing that this place held something important. She wasn't afraid. On the contrary, she felt that this moment was meant for her. She approached the mirror, and as soon as she looked into its surface, her gaze met her own reflection. But it wasn't just a reflection. In the mirror, she saw herself, but on a deeper level. It was a reflection of her soul, not her body. Lisa didn't recognize this image, although it was familiar to her. It was a purer, clearer, and more whole image. In this reflection, there was no fear, no doubts. It was Lisa in her deepest form. Lisa, who had accepted and freed all her inner contradictions. She stood and looked at her reflection, which seemed to smile at her. It wasn't an ordinary reflection. It was like a gaze from within herself, a gaze that said, "You are here. You exist, and everything is okay." Lisa felt warmth growing in her chest, as if she had finally accepted her own life, with all its paradoxes, surprises, and failures. She realized that there was no need to strive for perfection. She was already perfect in her imperfection, and that was what she had been searching for. She smiled quietly and took a step back, keeping the mirror in her field of vision. She no longer tried to understand what this was. She simply felt it and realized that each day of her life was part of her journey. Lisa didn't seek answers, because life itself was taking her where she needed to go. The process of accepting herself had been long and sometimes difficult, but now, as she felt her heart fill with this truth, she understood that this path was just the beginning. She was no longer the one who feared change. She had already accepted change as a natural part of life. Lisa looked again at the world around her and felt gratitude for this moment. It was as important as all the others. Upon returning home, Lisa didn't immediately go to sleep. She went out onto the terrace, where the evening wind quietly whispered. The sunset bloomed on the horizon, turning the sky into pastel shades of pink and orange. Lisa sat in an old chair and gazed at this beautiful sight. Each evening seemed to give her a new perspective on her life. She realized that each day was like a small sunset, a moment to stop, look back, and feel that everything had been as it should be. And each new day, like a new dawn, offered new possibilities. Today, however, she understood that this sunset was not just the end of the day, but the completion of some stage in her journey. In her soul, there was a sense of peace and fulfillment. Just like the sun, slowly sinking behind the horizon, she realized that her path had no end. It would continue, but now she knew how to be in harmony with it. The sunset she watched was a symbol of transition, just like life itself. Lisa closed her eyes and allowed herself to immerse in the feeling of eternity. Weeks passed, and Lisa began to notice that her perception of time had changed. Each day now brought not just new events, but also an opportunity for self-reflection, to realize what she was ready to leave behind. More and more, she felt that her past no longer influenced her present. She had freed herself from old resentments, stereotypes, and limitations that once held her in their grip. She had learned to let go. Today, while walking along the path in the forest, she caught herself thinking that she no longer feared her past pain. Lisa didn't forget it, but she no longer allowed that pain to define her life. There was no longer space in her heart for heavy memories. She understood that the past had been an important lesson, but it did not determine her future. Lisa looked into the sky ahead of her and saw how the clouds slowly dissolved into the horizon. In this heavenly transition, she felt symbolism. Just like her life, it smoothly transitions from one state to another without struggle or fear. After her walk in the forest, Lisa returned home, but this time she felt the need to spend time in the shade of her garden. She sat under an old tree, and its shadow enveloped her like a soft blanket. The tree's shadow seemed alive, not just a physical cover from the sun, but also a metaphor for the shadow in her own soul. Lisa closed her eyes and felt her body fill with calm. But now, in the shade, she was ready to meet those parts of herself that she had once hidden. In this moment of shadow, Lisa accepted that even in her darkest experiences, there was something valuable. She was no longer afraid of these shadows. They were a part of her, a part of the path she had walked. Her thoughts, like shadows, began to dance gently at the edge of her consciousness. They were not scary, not something to avoid. They were simply a part of her experience, a part of her past decisions, mistakes, fears, and doubts. All of it had become a part of her, and now, looking at these shadows, Lisa understood that each one carried a lesson. With each passing day, Lisa discovered more of her inner strength, which came not from her mind, but from her very essence. And today, sitting in the shade of the tree, she felt this strength manifesting in her with new intensity. Lisa sat in a lotus position and closed her eyes, ready to dive into herself. There was no fear in her heart. She had already learned to be in this moment, trusting her inner world. And then, like a soft but clear voice in her head, she heard, "You are ready to meet yourself." At first, it was an unclear feeling, like a faint whisper. But gradually, the voice became louder, and Lisa realized that this wasn't just an inner monologue. This was the voice of her inner sage, her true, unchanging self, the one who had always been with her, even when she hadn't been aware of its presence. You already have everything you need. You already know all the answers. You just have to trust yourself, the voice said. Lisa felt her body fill with warm light, and she took a deep breath, letting these words penetrate her heart. It was liberation. She wasn't seeking anything outside. She knew that all the wisdom was already within her. Her path wasn't about searching, but about accepting what already was. She understood that this meeting with her inner sage wasn't random. It was a confirmation that she was ready to act with inner confidence and light. The next morning, Lisa woke up with clarity, filling her heart with joy and freedom. She no longer tried to control her life. She simply let it unfold. Lisa felt that the time had come for her. With every step, she felt more and more that her presence in the world was becoming harmonious. With each passing day, she believed more in her abilities, in her ability to be herself, love herself, let go of doubts, and live each moment. Liza stopped fighting with herself and with the world. She was already a part of this world, and this world was a part of her. She stepped out of the house, walking on the morning dew, feeling the cold drops on her feet. It was like a small awakening. And so, step by step, she walked the path that was meant only for her. Liza walked for a long time until she stopped by a stream running through the forest. She sat on the bank, hands folded on her knees, and looked at the clear water. The stream didn't try to fight the obstacles, didn't try to go around them. It simply flowed, smoothly and effortlessly. Liza felt her soul fill with this calm flow. She realized that her life could be like that too. There was no need to fight the current, no need to control every step. Everything would happen when she let go of control. Life, like the stream, would flow, and all she had to do was follow the flow, trusting every moment. Liza smiled at herself, feeling lighter than ever before. In that moment, she realized that she was ready for the next step in her journey. And no matter what awaited her ahead, she was ready to face everything life would bring. After Liza realized her inner liberation and learned to be in harmony with herself, she felt her attitude toward the surrounding world change. Previously, her thoughts about the external world were filled with worry and fear, but now she saw it in a new light. This world, with its vibrant colors and sounds, became accessible to her, as if she had suddenly learned to see it again. One morning, deciding to take a walk through the village, Liza noticed how the world around her was filled with new sensations. She noticed how the light slid over the old stones on the street, how the leaves rustled when the wind touched them. These moments were simple, but such details could have slipped past her attention before. Liza felt how lightness appeared in her body, as if she was becoming part of this world again. She walked down the street, looking at people's faces, and suddenly realized that she no longer feared their gaze. It used to seem to her that her appearance or behavior were subject to judgment, but now she understood that her inner world was more important than anything. Her confidence allowed her to meet people with kindness and understanding. She decided to spend more time around people, sharing the inner light she felt. Liza began engaging in conversations with neighbors, helping old friends who needed support, and thus connecting more deeply with the world around her. She wasn't trying to change anyone or anything, but instead, she allowed herself to be real, free of fear and doubt. Several weeks passed, and Liza noticed how her life was filled with new encounters. People she hadn't seen in a long time started appearing in her life, as if her changes had attracted them. One day at the market, she met an old acquaintance, Vera, a woman with warm eyes, who had once worked with Liza at a bookstore. Vera approached with a smile and asked for help with her new project. "You've always been so wise and open, Liza. I know you can help me. I'm opening a small cafe, and I need someone who understands how to create the right atmosphere," Vera said. Liza was a little surprised, but felt that this offer wasn't just a coincidence. It was an opportunity for her to apply her inner light in a new context. She agreed, and this became her first step into a new project. She helped Vera create a space that reflected peace and harmony, and her ideas about design and atmosphere brought joy not only to the cafe owners, but to everyone who visited. Every morning, as she entered the cafe, Liza felt her heart fill with pride for having created something that inspired others. This process became another form of self-expression for her, but also a way to share her inner harmony with those around her. Liza became part of something larger, and she felt that her actions were influencing the world. With every new project, Liza trusted herself and her inner voice more and more. She began to realize that her previous doubts and fears no longer had a place on her new path. She could rely on her intuition without needing constant external validation. Liza also began to engage in creativity, painting pictures, writing short notes and stories she had once only dreamed of. This became her way of expressing all the changes that were taking place in her life. She understood that creativity didn't have to be something great or important for others. What mattered was that it gave her the opportunity to be real, to express her feelings and experiences. Her paintings, in which she used bright, rich colors, became her way of connecting inner harmony with the outer world. Each brushstroke was like a small message to herself, a reminder of how important it was to be in the moment. Liza learned to accept everything the day brought and express it through her creativity. She didn't strive for perfection. Each of her paintings was unique and reflected her current state. One day, standing at the easel, Liza looked at the painting and realized that she no longer sought to change or control. She allowed life to be just as it was. And at that moment, with that painting before her, Liza felt complete agreement with herself and the world. It was a moment of peace she had been searching for. Several months later, Liza could look back on her journey with a sense of deep satisfaction. She realized that there was no need to seek grand changes or huge successes. The true purpose of her journey was not to find herself, but simply to be herself, living in harmony with herself and the world. The most important lesson for her was the realization that each person chooses their own path. For her, the path wasn't the goal. It was the process. This process was part of her, and she embraced it with gratitude. Liza felt that her life was now filled with meaning. And although many unexplored horizons remained ahead, she was not afraid of them. She knew that wherever she was, whatever happened, she would always be with herself and would always find peace in her inner world. With each passing day, Liza felt her inner world becoming more harmonious, and she sought to apply these changes not only in her personal life, but also in how she interacted with the world. Walks in the forest, working at the cafe, engaging in creativity, all these helped her delve deeper into herself. But despite this harmony, Liza knew that new opportunities, meetings, and challenges awaited her on the horizon that would require her attention and readiness. One foggy morning, she decided to return to the old library she had often visited in her youth. It was a place where she had once begun searching for answers to many questions. Here, among the shelves of books, Liza felt that the space was full of memories, experiences, and hidden knowledge. When she entered the library, an old librarian greeted her warmly, recognizing her. "You're back again," he said with a smile. Liza nodded and began to wander through the familiar shelves. She felt her hand reaching for a book she had always wanted to take but never dared. It was a book about the philosophy of life and its meaning, a book she had long wanted to study. Sitting at a table, Liza opened the page. She was absorbed in reading, as with each word, new horizons opened up for her. This book became not just a source of knowledge, but a reminder that each person, in search of truth, creates their own unique road. Liza realized that her path wasn't something fixed. It continued to evolve and change, and she was ready for any changes life would bring. With each passing day, Liza felt her inner light becoming brighter. But despite this, she had no desire for grand changes. On the contrary, she sought simplicity and peace in what was already there. This inner clarity made her realize an important lesson. True enlightenment doesn't come from what we get, but from what we let go of. One day, sitting in her garden, Liza felt her soul fill with gratitude for everything she had experienced. Having gone through many trials, she found the strength to forgive herself and let go of what had once burdened her. This forgiveness became an important moment in her life, a moment when she found completeness. With each passing day, Liza increasingly realized that her life was not a series of random events. Everything had happened exactly as it was meant to, and she was learning to perceive every moment as part of her personal transformation. She didn't try to control events. She was simply ready to accept them, whether joy or hardship. On the last day of her summer walk through the forest, Liza felt that her path had reached an important milestone. She no longer sought meaning in individual events. The meaning for her had become the process of life itself. She no longer tried to understand what would come next because she realized that every moment was already part of this amazing journey. Standing on the top of the hill, she looked back at everything she had gone through and everything that awaited her ahead. In this moment, there was no fear, no anxiety. There was only a sense of deep peace and inner harmony. Liza realized that she didn't need to constantly search for answers. She had already found them. The answer was to live in harmony with herself and the world around her. Liza returned home with a feeling of completeness. She no longer felt the need for searching, because she was already where she needed to be. She accepted her path and realized that there was no final destination. Every step, every moment, was part of her journey. That evening, sitting by the window and watching the sunset, Liza felt her heart fill with gratitude for everything she had experienced. It was a farewell, but not with pain, rather with complete acceptance. She was saying goodbye to the parts of herself that were no longer needed: doubts, fears, and worries. All of that was behind her, and now Liza was ready to be herself, authentic, free from limitations. Inside her, there was total peace. She knew that her life had been a beautiful journey, full of discoveries and changes. Now, looking back, she realized that every challenge, every encounter, and every choice she made had brought her here, to this moment, where she could simply be in the present, appreciate life, and enjoy its simplicity. Liza closed her eyes and felt herself dissolve into this moment. Everything she had once sought was now within her. This was the completion of her journey. But perhaps it was just the beginning of a new stage, a new path that would continue, but now with complete clarity and inner light.